And joining us now on our Book Talk segment, great to welcome in. It's been really a fascinating book as we are talking today. It is the 70th anniversary, hard to believe, of the end of World War II, and this book tells a really interesting story. It's called Single-Handed, the inspiring true story of Tibor Teddy Rubin. He's a Holocaust survivor, Korean War hero, and Medal of Honor recipient. We'll find out about it. Daniel M. Cohen joins us today on the telephone, the author. And Daniel, good to talk with you. How are you?
Oh, fine. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, good to have a chance to chat with you. My dad was in World War II, so I've always had an interest, obviously, in that. And this is another one of those great stories that people should know about, I think. But, wow, what an inspiring story. Tough thing that he's gone through. But talk a little bit about how first you got involved with it.
I met Teddy Rubin 4 years ago. He absolutely charmed me because instead of talking about the terrible things that had happened, he was funny and is full of anecdotes about actually quite humorous things that occurred to him, not so much when he was a child in the Holocaust, but later on in military service, and some actually quite humorous things that occurred in the Chinese prison camp where he spent 30 months in 1950, starting in 1950.
Yeah, he was actually in a prison camp as a teenager, wasn't he, originally?
Yes, he was captured by the Nazis during the Hungarian Holocaust in 1944. He was 14 years old, and he spent the last part of the war barely surviving in Mauthausen, which is located in Austria.
You wonder, obviously it's terrible for anybody to be in that, but a 14-year-old, I guess his whole family was taken, right? Is that why he was there?
Well, actually, his parents and youngest sister died, but his brother, who also was in Mauthausen for a time, survived, and so did another brother and two sisters. Their stories were quite harrowing, but Tibor survived because the Nazis were not as interested in children in this particular camp. It was a work camp as opposed to a death camp, so they worked people to death. It wasn't an extermination camp per se.
Yeah.
Quite fortunate.
And he was there how long as a teenager?
About 14 months. Between 12 and 14 months. The time is a bit sketchy. He was quite young, and he was very sick when they liberated him. In fact, he was delirious and dehydrated at that point. And he was actually, he owes his life to an American nurse who quickly administered an IV and actually, rescued him on the brink of death.
Yeah. What did he do at that time? He would have been, 15, 16 years old. Where did he go right from there?
Well, he spent 3 months in a DP camp. 3 years in a DP camp. Finally got to America. And as soon as he learned English, his objective was to join the U.S. Army to repay his liberators. So, and his friends thought he was crazy because he'd just come out of this dire situation not a few years back. And while they were all getting girlfriends, trying to get work, and to live the American dream, Tibor wanted to serve.
Yeah, that's an amazing thing at that time. You would think he'd want nothing to do, not necessarily want to repay, but just have nothing to do with the military at that point. But that's a great thing.
No, just the opposite.
Yeah,
just the opposite.
So he wound up in the Army and off to Korea.
Yes, he was training in Okinawa, and when the Korean War broke out, his CO said that he didn't have to serve because he wasn't an American citizen. They were glad to send him to another assignment. Tibor said, nope, I want to stay with the guys I'm with. I'm glad to go to Korea and do whatever I can. And he did amazing things, as you know if you've looked at the book.
Yeah.
Just remarkable things.
And he goes to Korea, serves in the military, and again he gets put in a camp, right?
Yeah, well, first he single-handedly held off a hill from hordes of Koreans in the middle of the night. He had been left there by a sergeant who hated his guts and assigned him to oversee an ammo dump while the rest of the company retreated. Well, bad luck again for Tibor because in the middle of the night, actually at dawn, the Koreans attacked, and he had, by that time, fortified the foxholes with grenades and ammunition and managed to hold them off for hours until the American airplanes came and chased them away. So then he was captured after that.
Yeah, the Chinese captured him. I guess, 400 other soldiers as well, and put him in a North Korean camp.
Yeah, what happened there was that his battalion was ambushed by the Chinese in the very north of the country. MacArthur never thought that the Chinese would get involved, but they did. And Tibor was involved in the what was called the Little Bighorn of Korea. He and the other survivors of that, and there weren't all that many, were gathered together and placed in prison camps all along the Yala River, where most of them remained for the better part of 3 years.
And at this time, he tells some great descriptive stories of what he did while he was captured. He helped his other fellow GIs, some who were wounded, sick, survival skills. It's amazing.
Exactly. He knew how to rid his clothes of lice. He knew how to treat dysentery. He knew he knew all variety of things that he'd learned in the concentration camp. In addition to which, he would regularly escape from the camp and scour the local fields and local storehouses and steal food and bring it back for these guys who were desperate for food, because this was the coldest winter in 100 years, and the Chinese didn't even have food for their own people. It was a really dire situation, and Tibor was tough as nails.
Yeah. And he got injured as well, right? Was it a leg injury? Is that what he had?
He was injured several times. Early in the war, he suffered from a mortar attack. His leg was damaged, but he recovered from that. And then during the Battle of Ansan, he took shrapnel in his hand and again in his other leg and in his chest a little bit. But it was not enough to stop him. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, amazing. And he was in the camp for, finally got liberated, 1953?
Yes, he was repatriated. Actually, the Chinese were, in contrast to the Germans, quite humane. And again, it's a matter of comparative,
right,
because their objective was to indoctrinate American soldiers into communist thinking. So after the first horrible winter, when things weren't as bad, they were forced to endure many classes, which our government likened to the Manchurian Candidate,
sure,
although it was nothing like that. Tibor resisted, as did 95% of all the men. And then, as you pointed out, he was repatriated in '53.
Yeah, came to California, was able to, got married, had a family. What did he do for a living when he got back to California?
Well, the first thing he did is basically to let loose after all those years of fighting and all the rest of that. He finally settled down about 10 years later, married a gorgeous woman, also an immigrant, and they had 2 children, and he remained completely silent about everything he did in the war, both wars, for 30 years. Yeah. Not even his wife and children knew what he did. In 1980, he went to a POW convention, met up with some of his war buddies, and they took the mantle of insisting that he go after his medal, the medals that he had been denied during his military career.
It's so common. I mean, you go back to the Tom Brokaw special he did on The Greatest Generation, and a lot of documentaries. Most of these men, some women too, but most of the men just didn't want to talk about it, right? They just put it away, their experiences.
Yeah, I think it had a lot to do with his background and his religious training and so forth. I mean, these guys would call his house to talk to his wife, and she didn't know who they were or where they came from. They'd say, do you realize your husband saved my life in Korea? I mean, this was news to everybody in his family. And finally, Tibor acknowledged it and started to tell its stories. And gosh, it took 25 years, but ultimately he got the medal in 2005.
Yeah, President George W. Bush gave him the Medal of Honor. And now, when you were thinking about doing this book, was he reluctant to tell these stories again? Was he open about it, or how'd you find it?
Well, what he wanted to do is he wanted to talk about all the funny things that happened, like how the Chinese tried to, recruit him because they found out he was from Hungary, and maybe he'd want to go back to communist Hungary, and they'd give him a house and a job and find him a beautiful woman, and he just said, I'm not interested. I don't want to do that. I want to stay here with my guys. And these guys thought he was crazy because these guys thought they were never going to see America again.
Yeah.
So when he talked to me, he didn't want to talk about the really down and dirty things, but there were a sheath of letters that served as testimonies to Congress that had been gathered up 20, 30 years before. And those letters, some of them were pages and pages, were the living testimony of his heroics, because these guys all wrote down, as best they could, the things that he'd done for them over the years. And those letters, they would bring tears to your eyes. They were just, and they're a big part of the book.
Yeah,
and they, that was what convinced me to write the book, ultimately.
Yeah, just, obviously terrible things people had to go through, but out of that came so many, great poignant stories of acts of bravery and kindness and all that kind of thing. It's amazing somebody like that was able to survive, but now is he in decent shape now? I know he's, is he late 70s now, early 80s?
No, he's 85 and
85?
change and in not good health. Yeah, I was very lucky that for about a year and a half I was able to interview not only Tibor, but two guys who served with him and were in Camp 5 on the Yallow. And these guys helped me to assemble the story because they knew him in different ways. And I could go back to Tibor and say, well, what about this and what about that? And it would jog his memory. He's not that healthy anymore, but really he supplied me with so much stuff and so many things that made this book come to life that I'm deeply grateful for having that opportunity.
Yeah, amazing story. And I know you're a filmmaker as well, so I would imagine the film is in the works, right?
Well, this is a big movie, and I've made a couple indie films, and they're very different. I can't get a movie like this, but if the book is successful and people see it, I think there are those that will want to do it. I'm a good screenwriter, and I've done a turn now as a book writer, but I'm very hopeful that the right people see it and that it's successful, and there is a film, because it'll be a great one.
Oh, no doubt. Well, the name of the book is called Single-Handed, the inspiring true story of Tibor Teddy Rubin, who just survived unbelievably the Holocaust, the Korean War, being imprisoned, and of course wins the Medal of Honor, awarded the Medal of Honor back in a few years ago. And we've been talking with Daniel M. Cohen today. Daniel, I know the book came out, doing very well, just came out. Do you have a website? People can get a hold of you, the book?
Yes, I'm glad you asked. It's available on all the major book sites, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and so forth. But there's a lot of information and some exclusive pictures, including slideshows and other things, on my website, which is, it's an easy one. It's DanielMCohenAuthor.com. Cohen is my last name. It's a real easy one, DanielMCohenAuthor.com. And there's a lot of stuff there, and otherwise, I think Barnes & Noble is carrying it. I know Amazon has it, and I hope your listeners are interested enough to investigate.
Great. Yeah, we also have a place on our website for the podcast. People can order it as well. But, Daniel, really appreciate you taking the time. Again, fascinating story, and I know the people out there are going to really enjoy reading it, and hopefully we can talk to you again. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it, Doug.
If you'd like to order the book we're talking about, please go to DougMilesMedia.com and enter the author's name in the Amazon search box. Thank you for listening. Please come back soon for more conversations here at DougMilesMedia.com. This has been a presentation of Doug Miles Media, all rights reserved. You can listen to or download previous programs at iTunes, Stitcher.com, or Doug Miles.